King Henry VIII was born on June 28, 1491, in Greenwich Palace, England. The second son of King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, Henry became heir to the throne after the unexpected death of his older brother, Arthur, in 1502. From an early age, Henry was educated in a range of subjects, including languages, history, music, and theology, and showed great promise as a scholar and athlete. By the time of his accession to the throne in 1509, after the death of his father, he was already known for his charisma, ambition, and strong sense of authority. Henry's reign is most famously associated with his 6 marriages and his break from the Roman Catholic Church, which resulted in the English Reformation. His first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, the widow of his older brother Arthur, in 1509. They had one surviving child, Mary, but after more than 20 years of marriage, Henry became desperate for a male heir. He sought to annul his marriage to Catherine, claiming that their union was cursed by God because she had been married to his brother. The Pope's refusal to annul the marriage led Henry to break with the Catholic Church, leading to the establishment of the Church of England. In 1533, Henry married Anne Boleyn, whom he had fallen in love with during his efforts to secure an annulment from Catherine. Anne's pregnancy resulted in the birth of Elizabeth, future Queen of England, but she failed to produce a male heir. In 1536, Anne was executed on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, though the charges were likely fabricated. Henry then married Jane Seymour, who gave birth to his long-awaited son, Edward, in 1537. Tragically, Jane died just days after childbirth. In 1540, Henry married Anne of Cleves, a German princess, but the marriage was short-lived. He found Anne unattractive and had their marriage annulled within 6 months. Henry then married Catherine Howard, a cousin of Anne Boleyn, in 1540. Catherine was young and vivacious, but she was executed in 1542 for committing adultery, a crime that Henry could not overlook. His final marriage was to Catherine Parr in 1543. Catherine outlived Henry, who died in 1547 at the age of 55. Despite his tumultuous marital history, Henry's reign marked a significant shift in English history, particularly with the establishment of the Church of England, which had far-reaching religious and political consequences for both England and Europe. Henry's reign was also marked by military campaigns, particularly in France, although these were often costly and unsuccessful. He was a strong and influential ruler, known for his lavish court and his patronage of the arts, as well as his reform of the English legal system and the administration of government. Henry's desire for control over both religious and political matters shaped his legacy, and while he left behind a divided kingdom, his children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, would go on to become some of the most influential monarchs in English history. Henry's impact on English society was profound, as his decisions led to the dissolution of monasteries and a shift in religious practices. His establishment of the English Church, combined with his forceful personality and tumultuous personal life, ensured that his reign would be remembered as one of the most significant in the history of England. Henry VIII's reign also left a significant mark on England's economy and the structure of its society. His policies helped to shape the country's future, particularly in terms of governance and land distribution. The dissolution of monasteries, which began in 1536 and was completed by 1541, was perhaps the most radical of his religious reforms. The dissolution resulted in the closure of hundreds of religious houses across England, and the wealth and land of these institutions were seized by the crown. This not only enriched Henry and strengthened his control over England's resources, but also fundamentally altered the landscape of English society by displacing the traditional power of the church and redistributing land to a new class of nobility and gentry. Henry's desire for a male heir drove much of his political decisions, but his obsession with this goal was a double-edged sword. His break from Rome and the creation of the Church of England was in part driven by his quest for a divorce from Catherine of Aragon, which was denied by Pope Clement VII. This split created a religious rift that would last for centuries, leading to both turmoil and transformation within England. By rejecting the authority of the Pope and the Catholic Church, Henry laid the groundwork for future Protestant reforms and conflicts, most notably during the reigns of his children, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. Though Henry had 6 wives, his relationship with his children was often strained, particularly with his daughters. His son, Edward VI, succeeded him after his death, but Edward's reign was short-lived as he died young in 1553. Following Edward's death, the throne passed to Mary I, Henry's Catholic daughter, who attempted to reverse her father's religious reforms. However, it was Elizabeth, his second daughter, who would prove to be the most successful monarch of his line. Elizabeth I, who ascended the throne in 1558, solidified the Protestant Reformation in England and was one of the most influential rulers in English history. Despite Henry's marriages and the turbulence surrounding his quest for a male heir, his legacy was marked by the profound impact he had on the monarchy and the kingdom. His rule expanded royal power, transformed England's religious landscape, and set the stage for the emergence of the English Renaissance. Under his reign, English culture flourished with advancements in literature, art, and exploration. The Tudor court became a center of patronage for writers, musicians, and artists, and figures like Sir Thomas More, Hans Holbein the Younger, and Thomas Wyatt contributed to the intellectual and cultural life of the time. Henry's reign also marked a shift in the balance of power between the monarchy and the nobility. While he maintained a strong central authority, he also sought to limit the power of the aristocracy, which had been a constant challenge to English monarchs. His efforts to consolidate power led to the creation of an efficient bureaucracy that allowed the king to directly control and govern the realm more effectively. In his later years, Henry became increasingly paranoid and tyrannical, particularly in his treatment of those around him. His court was marked by purges and executions, especially in the case of those he suspected of disloyalty or treason. These included prominent figures such as Thomas More and Bullen and Thomas Cromwell, the architect of his break with Rome. His mental and physical health also deteriorated, possibly exacerbated by obesity and complications from jousting injuries, which left him unable to engage in active governance as he had in his earlier years. Henry VIII died on January 28, 1547, at the age of 55, after a reign of 38 years. His death marked the end of an era, and his successors would continue to grapple with the religious and political changes he had set in motion. His body was buried at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, and although his reign had been marked by controversy and personal turmoil, he is remembered as one of the most transformative monarchs in English history. His legacy, particularly through the creation of the Church of England, the strengthening of the monarchy, and his lasting influence on English culture, politics, and religion, continues to shape the nation to this day. After Henry VIII's death, England entered a period of further instability and change, much of which was directly influenced by his actions during his reign. His son, Edward VI, succeeded him, but due to his young age at the time of his accession, a regency was established. Edward's reign was short-lived, and he died in 1553, leaving the throne to his half-sister Mary I, Henry's first daughter with Catherine of Aragon. Mary, a devout Catholic, sought to restore Catholicism in England and reverse her father's religious reforms. She became notorious for her persecutions of Protestants, which earned her the moniker Bloody Mary for the hundreds of Protestants she executed during her reign. However, after Mary's death in 1558, the throne passed to Elizabeth I, Henry's second daughter by and Bullen. Elizabeth's reign, often referred to as the Elizabethan era, was marked by a return to Protestantism and the stabilization of England's religious landscape. Elizabeth successfully consolidated the Protestant Reformation, and her reign saw the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, the expansion of English influence overseas, and the flourishing of English culture, particularly in literature and the arts, with figures such as William Shakespeare coming to prominence. While Henry VIII had passed away decades earlier, the consequences of his decisions, especially his break from Rome and the creation of the Church of England, continued to reverberate throughout English history. His children, despite their different religious policies and approaches to governance, all shaped the future of the nation in ways that were deeply tied to his actions. The monarchy's control over the church and its increasing centralization of power were both legacies of Henry's reign, and his influence on English identity, religiously, politically, and culturally, remained evident for generations. In terms of his personal legacy, Henry VIII's turbulent marriages and the resulting dramas were often the subject of historical reflection and popular storytelling. His marriages, his ruthless pursuit of a male heir, and his role in the downfall of several prominent figures in his court made him both a controversial and compelling figure. Over the centuries, Henry has been the subject of numerous books, plays, and films, and his reign is frequently analyzed in historical studies for the far-reaching implications it had on the monarchy, the English people, and the broader European political landscape. Beyond his marriages and the religious transformations he initiated, Henry's reign is also remembered for the significant expansion of royal power and the strengthening of the Tudor dynasty. His ability to consolidate power, assert his authority over the church, and manipulate political situations helped to shape the centralization of the English monarchy, a process that would continue in subsequent reigns. His efforts to increase his own authority, both politically and religiously, provided the monarchy with a more direct control over the nation's governance, even if that meant resorting to drastic measures like executions and the dissolution of the monasteries. The king's influence on English law and politics also extended beyond his lifetime. His establishment of the royal supremacy, which gave the monarch supreme authority over the church in England, would continue to affect English legal and religious systems. This separation from Rome not only redefined the relationship between church and state, but also provided the monarchy with an unprecedented level of control over religious matters, which would be central to later developments in English governance. Though he may have been personally flawed, with his reputation marred by his tyrannical behavior, Henry VIII's reign undeniably shaped the course of English history. His reign set the stage for the expansion of English influence globally, as his decisions to sponsor maritime exploration paved the way for the establishment of the British Empire. His legacy also paved the way for the English Renaissance, as his court became a center for the arts and humanist scholarship, contributing to the flourishing of English culture. In the final analysis, Henry VIII remains one of the most significant and complex monarchs in English history. His reign was marked by dramatic personal choices, sweeping religious reforms, and political innovations that would impact England for centuries to come. While his actions were often controversial, and his personality could be ruthless and unpredictable, his reign was pivotal in shaping both the destiny of England and the broader course of European history. Through his 6 marriages, his break with Rome, and the lasting effects of his decisions, Henry VIII's legacy continues to be felt in the modern world. Both as a symbol of monarchical power and as a testament to the transformative forces he set in motion as time went on, Henry VIII's impact continued to echo through the centuries, even long after the monarchy had evolved and changed. One of the most lasting aspects of his legacy was the establishment of the Church of England, which became the defining feature of England's religious identity. The split from Rome and the subsequent formation of the Anglican Church set England on a religious path that would diverge sharply from the rest of Catholic Europe. This religious independence allowed England to foster its own identity, distinct from the religious conflicts and power struggles that plagued other European nations. The legacy of religious reform that Henry started was carried on through the reigns of his children, especially Elizabeth I, who solidified Protestantism in England and helped to establish it as the state religion. Despite the drama and controversy surrounding his personal life, particularly his numerous marriages, Henry VIII's impact on the political and social structure of England cannot be overstated. His reign marked a decisive break from medieval governance and paved the way for a modern centralized monarchy. Henry's establishment of royal supremacy, the concept that the monarch was the ultimate authority on religious and political matters, shifted the balance of power in England. This authority became a model for subsequent monarchs, and it influenced political thought throughout Europe, ultimately contributing to the concept of the divine right of kings. The dissolution of the monasteries, which saw the destruction of much of England's monastic heritage, also had profound economic consequences. With the church's wealth and land seized by the crown, Henry used the proceeds to support his lavish lifestyle and military campaigns. But the redistribution of monastic land also created a new class of landowners. Many of these landowners were loyal supporters of the monarchy, strengthening Henry's rule and consolidating his power. However, the social and economic consequences of the dissolution were not entirely positive. The closure of monasteries led to the loss of vital services that the church had provided, such as charity, education, and health care. The rural poor, who had relied on the support of religious institutions, faced significant hardship as a result. Furthermore, the destruction of religious buildings and the loss of artistic and cultural heritage left a void that would never fully be filled.